Welcome back to another episode of the Writer's Review, where today we'll be returning to the Gentleman Bastard series written by Scott Lynch. In this video, I'll be talking about the Republic of Thieves, which is the third and most recent installment of the series. If by some chance you aren't caught up with my previous reviews in this series, I suggest that you follow the link to the playlist in the top right of your screen. Or if there's a particular aspect of this book that you're interested in, like its story, structure, the subgenre breakdown, or my final thoughts, feel free to scrub ahead in the video. With that out of the way, I hope you enjoy, and let's get on with the review. If we jump straight into the structural aspect of the Republic of Thieves, you won't be surprised to find that the novel retains many of the positive attributes that made its predecessors so well liked. I will say that the novel isn't just a rehashing of old ideas, as the author does his best to expand on some of them. For instance, the multi-point of view storytelling from Red Seas Under Red Skies makes a reappearance, but while with that novel we only got to see the world through the perspective of Jean and Locke, depending on the situation, with the Republic of Thieves we get an introduction of 3 new point of view characters, which allows us to see the world through a variety of new personal and cultural backgrounds. But for the sake of spoilers, I'll keep it a surprise as to who these 3 characters might be. Alongside that, the Republic of Thieves expands on the character developing flashback sequences of previous installments. With those books, these took the form of self-contained short story-like segments which fed into the backstory of the character traits of some of the main characters, although with the Republic of Thieves, this aspect of Scott Lynch's writing takes the form of a full-on secondary storyline parallel to the main one. So in that sense, with the Republic of Thieves, you're kind of getting 2 books merged into one. One structural aspect of the Republic of Thieves that hasn't changed from the previous installments is the prose itself. This largely remains the third-person, past-tense style of narration that you'll be used to from the previous books, although the author does take the liberty of adding a third-person, present-tense style of narration for stylistic effect here and there along the novel. But these segments really only make up less than 1% of the novel's total length, so it's barely worth mentioning. Moving on to the story of Republic of Thieves, well, you already know that it's split into 2 separate storylines. The first, and somewhat main storyline, is the direct continuation of events from Red Seas Under Red Skies. Obviously, this means that it starts out with Locke and Jean searching for a resolution to the poisoning incident from the end of Book 2. Inevitably, along the way, they get swept up in a political scheme where they get to flex their conman muscles. I will admit that at the start of my read-through, I was a bit worried that we'd be getting another instance of the battered gentleman bastards trying to pull miracles out of their hat while working with non-existent resources, but I'm glad to say that that isn't the case, because the benefactor of their scheme is the one providing the resources that they need to work at peak performance, which I will admit is very entertaining to read. The second storyline, however, is solely dedicated to the history of the Gentleman Bastards, and therefore features the reappearance of favorite characters like Chains and the Sansa twins, as well as the introduction of Sabbatha, Locke's main love interest, which, if you remember from the previous books, was hinted at to death. This subplot consists of the training the Gentleman Bastards went through throughout their teenage years, the other general antics of the Gentleman Bastards, as well as the beginnings of the relationship between Sabbatha and Locke, which of course has important ties to the main plotline throughout the entire length of the novel. Next, let's take a look at this novel's subgenre breakdown, with the first prominent element being the drama, which, if you've read any of the previous books, is pretty self-explanatory by now, so I won't waste time going into further detail. After that, you've got a combination of world building and fantasy elements, which have significantly increased in prominence from Red Seas Under Red Skies, and for the first time we get a real insight into the backstory of the Eldrin and of the Magi of Carthane, as well as the first real look into the backstory of Locke's shadowed past. Although, as with any good fantasy book, for every question answered, 5 more pop up in its place. The last core element of the Republic of Thieves is its romance elements. I'd even go as far to say that they form the core aspect of the novel's plot and theme, and naturally they revolve around the relationship between Sabbatha and Locke. Luckily, these elements are all written very well, with plenty of chemistry between the two characters, as well as tension. Although I will say that the bittersweet aspect to their relationship can be a bit frustrating at times. In a more supportive role, you also find comedy and suspense elements, but these really haven't changed from Red Seas Under Red Skies, so there's nothing new to report. The action elements consist mostly of a couple of fistfights here and there, as well as a new form of combat, which is a bit too spoilery to get into, but I will say that the action elements have been really toned down from Red Seas Under Red Skies, making the Republic of Thieves far more in line with the Lies of Locke Lamora in that regard. And at the very end, you have a combination of psychological and philosophical elements which delve into various questions about religion, identity, and the afterlife, both in terms of character development and world building. In terms of other quirks about this novel I think you should be aware of, it goes without saying that the usual colorful language of this series makes a reappearance in Republic of Thieves, as well as an addition of very descriptive descriptions of bodily relations between man and woman as part of the relationship aspect of this novel. I briefly deliberated adding this as a soft erotica subgenre to the novel, but since this is only 1 or 2 sequences throughout the entire novel, I just decided I'd mention it here. Another thing featured quite prominently in Republic of Thieves are the numerous cliffhangers, especially in the transitions between the 2 prominent storylines. Honestly, going from Red Seas Under Red Skies to Republic of Thieves, it really felt that in the time between the 2 books were published, Scott Lynch found a new love for cliffhangers and decided to go all out while writing this novel. I wouldn't say that it detracts from the reading experience, but it's definitely something you'll notice on your read-through. In conclusion, I would say that Republic of Thieves is definitely my favorite installment in the Gentleman Bastard series out of all the 3 currently published titles, especially since the author really leaned into the confidence scheme aspect of the story. Don't get me wrong, I did like the previous 2 books, but to me, The Lies of Locke Lamora felt more like a mystery book, while Red Seas Under Red Skies was honestly just a pirate adventure story. So it was really nice to see the author focus on the scheming aspect of the story instead of going on tangents or following other distractions. On my read-through of the novel, I noticed something really funny to me and somewhat random, which really reminded me of the writing of one of my friends, which is that Scott Lynch seemed to forget about one of the characters in the novel. Specifically, I'm talking about Locke's cat from Red Seas Under Red Skies. I mean, the author went through the trouble of reintroducing him back into the story, even made a few interactions between it and the protagonists, but then, about 4 hours into the story, the cat just disappears off the face of the planet. So, overall, Red Seas Under Red Skies is an amazing book, and I definitely suggest you go check it out. Perhaps the only annoying thing about it is that it'll take a bunch of time before we get to see the 4th book in this series. But, as always, if my word isn't enough for you, I'll have the usual ratings on screen now. The Republic of Thieves is available in ebook, paperback, mass paperback, hardcover and audiobook formats, and in terms of length it comes out at about 260,000 words or 27 hours for the audiobook version. Pricing-wise, the ebook and mass paperback copies stand on about equal footing at the $8 mark, followed by the normal paperback version at $15, followed by the audiobook at $20, and lastly the hardcover copy at $27. Of course, you can also get the audiobook for cheaper by using an Audible credit if you're an Audible Premium member, effectively lowering the price from $20 to $15. But as always, by the time you're watching this video, prices might have changed, so I'll have an Amazon link linked in the description below so you can check current pricing. And that about wraps up the spoiler-free section of this review, and I'll be moving on to the lesson section next. If you've made it this far into the video and enjoyed yourself, please consider liking the video so the algorithm gods know to recommend it to other people as well. Or if you really like the way I do these reviews, consider hitting the subscribe button. But I'll leave that decision up to you. Now, we'll be going on to the lesson section of this review, so spoiler warning ahead. Today, I'll be talking about the use of perspective as a stylistic tool in writing for the second video in a row. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I suggest you go back and watch the lesson section of my Kill Team review, which I'll have linked in the top right of your screen. I think it's a fascinating topic to think about, and it'll give you a bit more context for the content of this lesson section. In that video, I covered how the different uses of the first person, second person, or third person narration style can make a difference in the experience of a reader as he's reading your work, but with the Republic of Thieves, I'll be exploring the same principle, but this time with the use of different tenses. Now, in terms of the tense used, books generally fall into two groups. The first of these are books that use the present tense style of narration. A good example of this would be the Frontlines book series by Marco Close, and the second group is the group that features the past tense narration, like the Gentleman Bastard series, for instance. Of course, as with every rule, there is an in-between exception. For instance, the Galaxy's Edge series would be a good one, because with every installment in that series has multiple point-of-view characters, and some of these feature the past narration style, and others the present tense narration style. But as a general rule, even then, they generally stick to one or the other. So if a specific storyline begins in the present tense, the middle and end will also be in the present tense, and vice versa. The Republic of Thieves, however, is the first book that I've come across that kind of deviates from this principle. Sure, it doesn't do it a lot, but it does do it enough to warrant mentioning. Just in case you haven't read the novel, it's written primarily in the past tense, but throughout the plot, the protagonists have a decent amount of contact with the Magi of Carthage, a group of powerful magic users. In these encounters, they are introduced to their lore and history through a sort of memory-sharing process, and it's in these exact sequences where the author makes a switch to the present tense. Now on paper, this change in tense doesn't really seem like a big deal, but on my read-through I personally found it really impactful, specifically because it really highlighted the contrast between the things that happened in the real world and the events that were in this memory dream-like state. Sure, the author also altered other aspects of his style of writing to further sell the feeling of mysticism and out-of-this-world feeling of these sequences, but even with these changes, and without the change from past to present tense, I believe that these sequences would have been far less impactful. So in some sense, this is the ultimate example of a writer choosing to show rather than tell, because the author elected not only to describe the difference in perspective that the protagonists were having, but managed to alter the very lens through which the reader sees this fictional world. And that got me thinking about what other circumstances this same approach to writing could be used. I'm sure that there's plenty of other fun stuff you could do with it. In any case, that's enough of my rambling for this video. I hope you found it entertaining, and if you did, do consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. With that self-promotion out of the way, I hope you have a pleasant week, and I hope to see you next time.